In the misty lands of ancient Britain, long before the island was called England, there lived a woman who would rise from humiliation to shake the Roman Empire itself. Her name was Boudica. She was not born a conqueror, nor trained in the art of war like Caesar or Alexander. She was a queen, a mother, and for a time, the Romans thought she was nothing more than a footnote in their conquest of Britain. But Rome was wrong. Boudica was queen of the Iceni, a Celtic tribe in what is now East Anglia. Her husband, Prasutagus, had ruled as a client king under Rome. It was an uneasy peace. Prasutagus kept his crown, his tribe kept their lands, and Rome, in return, took loyalty and tribute. To secure his family's safety, Prasutagus tried to play both sides. When he died around 60 CE, he left his will naming Emperor Nero as co-heir alongside his own two daughters. It was a clever attempt to appease Rome while preserving his bloodline. But the Romans did not honor his wishes. They saw an opportunity. Client kings were tolerated only as long as they lived, and once Prasutagus was gone, the Romans swooped in like vultures. They annexed Iceni territory outright, seized the royal estates, and treated his will as worthless. For Boudica, the betrayal was personal and brutal. Roman officials flogged her publicly. Her daughters, still girls, were assaulted in front of their people. What Rome thought was an act of dominance only lit a fire that could not be contained. The Iceni were enraged, and other tribes who had also suffered under Rome's civilization felt the same. Rome had underestimated the cost of its arrogance. Boudica was not just a widow or a grieving mother. She became the voice of vengeance. Tall, with flowing red hair and a fierce gaze, she embodied both fury and hope. Ancient sources describe her as commanding, someone who could stir warriors with words alone. To tribes crushed under Roman taxes and forced labor, her voice was liberation. To those humiliated by soldiers and governors, her defiance was justice. Words spread quickly. The queen of the Iceni was calling for war, and Britain answered. The Trinovants, long resentful of Rome for building a colony on their lands, joined her cause. Soon, an enormous coalition of tribes formed around her banner. What had begun as a personal vendetta was becoming a national uprising. The Romans were unprepared. Governor Gaius Suetonius Paulinus was campaigning far away in Wales, trying to crush the Druids on the Isle of Mona. The Druids were Rome's great fear, said to fuel resistance with their rituals and influence. With Suetonius distracted, the heart of Roman Britain was left lightly defended. Boudica struck first at Camulodunum, modern-day Colchester, Rome's proud colony and symbol of domination. The town was built for veterans of the Roman legions, filled with settlers who treated the locals as inferiors. At its center stood a great temple to the deified Emperor Claudius, gleaming with Roman arrogance. To the Britons, it was a shrine to oppression. Boudica's army, tens of thousands strong, descended on the colony. The settlers were caught off guard, scrambling behind half-finished defenses. The temple became their final refuge, but it held only 2 days. The Britons stormed it, burning it to the ground. Camulodunum was wiped from the earth, every Roman settler slaughtered. Word of the destruction spread like wildfire. Panic gripped the province. Roman officials begged for reinforcements, but Boudica moved faster. Her army marched south, toward Londinium. Londinium was a bustling trade hub, not yet the great city it would one day become, but already vital to Rome's hold on Britain. Merchants, traders, and settlers crowded its streets. When Suetonius heard of Boudica's advance, he rushed to the city. But even he, a seasoned general, knew he could not defend it. He lacked the men. With heavy heart, he abandoned Londinium, evacuating as many as he could. Boudica arrived, and what followed was devastation. Her army leveled the city in flames. Those who remained were slaughtered without mercy. The smoke rose black against the sky, a scar Rome would never forget. Still, Boudica did not stop. Next, she turned her fury on Verulamium, modern-day St. Albans. Once again, the city was destroyed, its people cut down. Ancient sources claim that in the wake of her rebellion, more than 70,000 Romans and their allies were killed. Whether or not the numbers are exact, the scale of destruction was undeniable. For a moment, it seemed as if Rome might lose Britain altogether. A woman Rome had dismissed, a queen they had humiliated, was now commanding the largest revolt the island had ever seen. She had turned personal tragedy into national resistance. But while the fires of rebellion blazed, Suetonius was not idle. He gathered what forces remained loyal, battle-hardened legionaries who had faced Gaul, Germany, and countless foes. Outnumbered but disciplined, they prepared for a decisive confrontation. And that is where the first part of Boudica's story leaves us. A queen transformed into a warrior, her people united in vengeance, her enemies staggering in shock. Rome had been bloodied, its towns burned, its colonists slain. But the empire was not yet defeated. The storm Boudica unleashed was about to collide with the steel of Rome. The fires of rebellion still burned across Britain. Towns lay in ruins, Roman settlers lay dead, and fear gripped even the most loyal subjects of the empire. For the Iceni queen, Boudica, victory seemed not only possible but inevitable. She had crushed Camulodunum, Londinium, and Verulamium, wiping Roman presence from vast stretches of the island. To her people, she was not just a queen anymore. She was vengeance made flesh. But Rome was not finished. Gaius Suetonius Paulinus, the governor of Britain, had retreated, yes, but not out of cowardice. He was a soldier who had faced wars in Africa and Europe, a man who knew that sometimes survival was the greatest strategy. He pulled together the remnants of Roman strength. One legion had already been annihilated trying to stop Boudica's advance, but Suetonius still commanded hardened veterans. Slowly, he gathered them into a single force. He chose his battlefield carefully. Near a narrow gorge along the Roman road now called Waddling Street, he positioned his army with woods behind them and open ground in front. The gorge meant Boudica's far larger army could not surround him. This was no accident. The Romans knew that discipline and tactics could triumph over numbers, if only they could hold their line. Meanwhile, Boudica's army was swollen with numbers. Ancient sources claim as many as 200,000, though the true number was surely smaller. Still, they outnumbered the Romans many times over. Behind them, families and wagons lined the field, confident they were about to watch Rome itself die in Britain. Before the battle, Boudica rode out in a chariot, her long red hair streaming in the wind. She raised her voice so that not only her warriors, but their wives and children, could hear. She reminded them of Rome's cruelty, how the governor had flogged her, how her daughters had been dishonored. She spoke of freedom, of revenge, of the gods who stood with them against the invader. She told them they had a choice, to live as slaves under Roman rule, or to die as free Britons. The roar of her warriors shook the air. To them, Rome was already broken. This battle would only seal it. But Suetonius was calm. His men formed up into tight lines, shields interlocked, spears ready. The Roman legionary was no ordinary soldier. He was drilled to obey, to hold formation, to kill with ruthless efficiency. Their discipline would be their weapon. The Britons charged. Waves of warriors, howling and armed with spears, swords, and slings, surged toward the Roman line. The earth trembled under their feet. But as they reached the Romans, their fury met a wall of shields. Javelins flew from Roman hands, ripping through the charging mass. The first ranks fell, and the survivors slammed into an iron wall that did not break. Then came the counter. Suetonius ordered his men forward, wedges of soldiers driving into the disorganized horde. Roman short swords, built for stabbing in close combat, cut down warriors who swung wide, heavy blades. The Britons fought bravely, but their numbers worked against them. Packed tightly into the narrow field, they could not maneuver. Behind them, their own wagons trapped them in place. What had been a confident mob now became a panicked crush. The slaughter was merciless. Roman soldiers advanced step by step, cutting down thousands. Men, women, even children caught among the rebel camp were struck down as chaos turned into massacre. Ancient sources claim that as many as 80,000 Britons died that day, while Roman losses numbered only a few hundred. The figures may be exaggerated, but the outcome was undeniable. The rebellion was broken. And what of Boudica? Here, history grows uncertain. Some say she took poison rather than face capture, choosing to die on her own terms. Others claim she fell ill and died shortly after the battle. The truth is lost, but her fate was sealed. She would never see victory. For Rome, the revolt was both a catastrophe and a lesson. Entire towns had been erased, thousands of settlers and soldiers killed. But the empire endured because its discipline had held. Suetonius was harsh in victory, punishing tribes and tightening Rome's grip. Yet even Rome could not erase the memory of what had happened. Boudica became more than a queen. She became a symbol. To the Romans, she was a dangerous barbarian who had nearly undone their conquest. To the Britons, she was a heroine, a woman who dared to defy the greatest empire on earth. Centuries later, her story would be retold again and again. During the Renaissance, she became a figure of resistance. In the Victorian era, she was celebrated as a national icon, her statue erected near Westminster Bridge in London. Ironically, the very city she had once burned to ashes. Even today, she stands as a reminder that the will to resist cannot always be crushed by force. Her rebellion failed, yes, but it exposed the weakness of Rome's rule. The empire could conquer lands, build cities, and demand tribute, but it could not extinguish the human desire for freedom. Boudica's story is not one of victory. It is one of defiance, of a queen who turned personal tragedy into a call for war, of a woman who dared to challenge the most powerful empire the world had ever known. And though she fell, her name endures where countless Roman governors are long forgotten. When we remember Boudica, we remember not her defeat, but her courage. The flame she lit in Britain may have been crushed by Roman steel, but it still burns in the story of a queen who refused to bow. If you want more of this kind of stories, make sure to subscribe to this channel. Thank you.